The next topic we will cover is that of virtual private servers and the open SSH utility in the Bash shell. So let's transition over to my browser, which I have open my DigitalOcean account that allows me to open up virtual private servers. So I'm going to just create a droplet real quickly. It's just going to be a quick one. So we'll say an Ubuntu droplets. We're going to be using Linux. I'm going to the least expensive. I mean, this is only going to cost me a couple cents since I'm doing it for a test. And down here, what we're going to do is, we don't need to select any of these options. All of this is good. Maybe we will choose a different name. So my VPS tutorial. So that's going to be the host name of this machine. But the thing that I want to direct your attention to is this little area right here. And that is where you add your SSH keys. So in order to access this machine remotely from my terminal, I'm going to actually need to provide a pair of private and public RSA keys that DigitalOcean and my OpenSSH utility can kind of communicate between to validate my authenticity as a user and as the owner of this particular server. So as you can see, I can actually select one of these keys that I've already created, but we're going to go through the process of creating a key because you can do that within Bash. So when I click new SSH key, it's going to ask me to paste in my public key in the space below. Notice this is public. We never give it our private key. That only happens on our side, on the local side of the equation. So in our Bash shell, we need to use the SSH keygen utility to create our RSA key pair. So we press enter, and it's going to ask us what we want to name this. We always want to put it in the .ssh folder within the home directory. So I'm going to say home Zach.ssh, and then we'll just say tutorial, and that's going to be the name of our keys. So when I press enter, it's going to enter or ask me for a passphrase. I don't need to. I can just press enter, enter, and it has been created. So if I wanted to see what's in it, I can cat that out. So let me first clear the screen, and then we can go into the SSH folder and type in tutorial. And if I press enter, it's actually going to print out my private key. So in this case, I'm not going to keep this VPS running, so it doesn't matter. So I can print out my private key, and you can see it's pretty long. Now, what DigitalOcean wants is the public key, and every RSA key comes in a pair, so we can also specify the .pub. That's a file that was created with the keygen utility. So when we cat that out, we copy this key, and then we come over to our DigitalOcean and enter it right in there. And then we give it a name, so maybe tutorial or something key, and then we add that SSH key, and it's going to say that this is already in our account because I had previously kind of tested this out. So we're just going to select tutorial right here to use, and then create this VPS. And now we're just going to wait for the IP address so that we can log into this machine. And now that we have the IP address, we copy that and come back to our terminal, and now we should be able to log in. So we type SSHP22 for port 22. That's the standard SSH port. And then since we only have the root user, since we just started this Linux machine, we log in as root at this IP address. And it's going to ask us if we want to continue connecting. We type yes, and we are in. We are in our virtual private machine. Now once you're in here, you're going to want to have files on this machine. So I wanted to show you a useful utility called SCP, which allows you to copy files to and from your local and remote server. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to open up a new tab in my terminal, and this will be my local machine. So what I'm looking at here is like this machine sitting right in front of me, and on the left is my virtual private server that's out in the cloud somewhere. So maybe I wanted to copy a file from my local machine up to my VPS. And the way that I do that is by typing scp-r, and then I want to give it a file that I want to, or maybe even a directory that I want to put up on the VPS. And in this case, we're just going to put the example script that we just wrote, and then we pass that to the root at this IP address, and then give it a path after a colon to where we want to put it. So I'm going to put it in the home directory and press enter. You're going to see that it's going to show the transfer of 1.3 kilobytes per second. And if we now ls the home directory on our VPS, you can see we have that example script and we can run it. Now if we wanted to bring something down from the VPS, so say I added another script .sh, and there's going to be, maybe nothing in it. We're not going to put anything in it yet. And we want to transfer that file down to our local computer. We again come over to our local side and reverse the arguments. So this time we're going to say the machine we want to get it from and give it the file name and path. So it's another script.sh, so let's copy that so we get the name right in our home directory, and then we want to save this to our current directory on our local computer. So it's going to say that there's no such file or directory created, and the reason that this is not working is because we forgot to put this little colon here. So remember, put that in there, and we should now see that script come down, and if we look, we can see another script now exists on my local computer. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about is how we can use Visual Studio Code with our virtual private server. So maybe we wanted to edit this example script, and we can do so in Vim, but it'd be nice if we could have the full capabilities of a text editor with our virtual private server. The way that we do that is like so. We need to first download the utility called rmate onto our remote virtual private server. So we'll first type in the command here, and I will put this in the description, but we will first type in this command, which will get the file from GitHub. So we're going to download that first, and then we need to change the permissions on there with this command. So we now have our remote set up to work with rmate, which is going to work with VS Code. We now have to come into VS Code and download a little extension. So let me transition over there. And if you come over here to this little extensions icon and click it, we can type remote VS Code, and you're going to see I already have this installed, but you're going to want to install this, and then over here it gives you instructions on how to use it. So it basically says you want these three options set, and the way that you can do that is by typing Command P on Mac or Control Shift P on Linux, and it's going to give us this little drop down, and what I want to do is type Preferences, Open User Settings. So this is going to pop us into this page. I'll click Extensions, find the remote VS Code configuration, and then the three things that I want to set up is this one. I want it set to 127.001. I want to launch this on startup, so every time we start VS Code, this little rmate server will start up, and then this is going to be the port that we're going to be using for connection. So if you haven't set those up, and then exit out of your settings, you might have to save it. I'm not sure. I think it auto saves, so you should be good. And at this point, you have your Visual Studio Code set up. The only thing left is Command P or Control Shift P, and then you want to type Start Server. So it'll say Remote Start Server, and I've already got it started, so it's just going to restart it, as you see in the bottom left there for a second. We are now ready to go over to our terminal and open a file. So we can transition back to our VPS, and all we would have to do is type rmate and then the name of the file that we want to edit in Visual Studio Code. So when I press rmate, it's not going to work because we are not connected via this localhost port 52698. So this connection would be invalid, and we would need to log out first. So we are now back to our local machine. In order to make this work, we need to type in a little bit different way of connecting. So instead of SSH-P22, we're going to type SSH capital R, and then instead of 22, we're going to give it 52698 colon, and then 127.0.0.1 for localhost, and then repeat that same port, so 52698, and then at the end we're going to actually give it the IP address of our machine and press enter. So that's going to log us in, and it's all going to look the same, but now rmate is actually enabled. So if we were to then come over to Visual Studio, or first we need to open our file, so another script, and when I press enter, it's going to open it up in VS Code. And you didn't see that because I'm not on that screen, but if I transition back over to VS Code, you should see somewhere on here that we have another script. And if we, right now we just have gibberish in here, but we could also put in our bin bash and then put in a simple script. And I'll type Control S for save, so we saved it, and we actually saved that up to our server. So if we come back again to our server, we can run another script. We actually don't have the correct permissions on it, so let's do +X, another script, and then run it, and you're going to see that the stuff that we just edited actually is in that script now. So that's a great way to use Visual Studio Code with your remote server. It's going to really help you out and save you a lot of time.